So with that, I'd like to call this debate to order. On the resolution resolved, the Trump administration has been good for Black Americans. And so I'd like to ask for a speech in the affirmative from Joe Collins. Joe, go ahead and unmute yourself and give us your speech. You have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Trump administration, I am a Republican running for Congress in California's 43rd District. And as a Republican, we know that, President Trump is the leader of the Republican Party. He has done a lot of great things that can be used to improve the Black community and can be used to improve the quality of life for people in the Black community. My biggest thing, the thing that I like the most about the bills that President Trump has signed into law would be the opportunity zones. Now, a lot of people from the South LA area where I am and many other inner cities that has been controlled by Democrats for a very long time, we can attest to the fact that our communities have a serious lack of economic development. Now, as a candidate, when I get into office, this is one thing that I plan to improve. And if President Trump is elected again, these is one of the programs that I plan on using to improve the community by utilizing opportunity zones. Another thing is the criminal justice reform. The criminal justice reform, reading through the bill, has a lot of positive things that people who are coming out of the prison system can use in order to get reacclimated into society. And this is another thing that I plan to use. So, I applaud President Trump's effort. One thing that I am looking for President Trump to do is to actually come to the inner cities and tell us specifically about the programs that he has done and tell us the things that he is going to continue to do to improve the quality of life for people in urban America.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Are there questions for the speaker? You can go ahead and raise your hand, and the first question will go to a panelist. So don't be shy. You can raise your hand visually. Let's see. Well, if there are no panelists, oh, I see. Roderick, go ahead. Let's unmute you. Go ahead and unmute yourself and direct your question at me and ask it.
Yeah, I'm directing this to Madam Speaker, right? So
that's right. Yeah.
The panelist, I'm not familiar with his part of the country, but just in general, I'm questioning whether or not working class and poor Black Americans can benefit from those economic opportunity zones. I would like the panelists to respond to that.
All right, go ahead.
All right, so the way the opportunity zones work is if you are a person who can secure funding or you have a ground ready project, you can get with one of the sponsors in your region for opportunity zones to get your project either financed or get your project started. And one of the issues that we have here in Los Angeles is that the city council members have a opportunity zone fund in which people in our communities could put their money in. Now, the idea of the opportunity zone fund is when you put your money into this pot of money collectively with a lot of other citizens in your area, specifically speaking for California, the city council members will vote and they will use your money to invest in specific projects around the area. Now, I'm not familiar with your side of town, but for Los Angeles, that's how it's supposed to be being ran, but it's been pretty ineffective. I know a lot of people who have money, they've been able to invest in opportunity zones and use that to, maybe, gain wealth or, bring their business back to South LA, which is fine if they're hiring people who live in our community. But the opportunity zones were specifically designed for the people who live in that specific area to be able to reinvest. Now, unfortunately, a lot of people who live in urban America, specifically Black people and Latinos, we've been pretty disenfranchised when it comes to financial literacy. And so a lot of times you see that we don't have the necessary means to use the opportunity zones.
All righty, and thank you for that. And now we're going to take a couple of attendee questions. And the first one is from Chip Treen. Chip, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question. Remember to direct it to me.
Right. Madam Chair, I'd like to know how you evaluate the benefits of a good economy versus the, well, what some would say is a negative environment for civil rights and improved equal opportunity. How do you compare those two, what seem to me to be contradictory trends of the Trump administration?
All right, go ahead, Joe.
And in my opinion, whenever you evaluate, our country based on economic opportunities, they always look to the stock market. They say the stock market is doing great, the stock market is doing fine, but you can never equate that to the equality when it comes to the, the culture that we live in right now, especially in Black and Latino America. We do have laws that are still in place that they use to target us. So you see, Black and Latinos being targeted way more than you see other people, regardless of what the statistics say. And, we see it here in Los Angeles on a regular basis. There is no way to compare the two, in my opinion. Unfortunately, I would love to have a way to do it, but it's absolutely impossible right now.
All righty, great. And for the second question, I'd like to go to Jeff Thiemann or Thiemann, I'm not sure how to say it. But Jeff, go ahead and direct your question to me, and we will ask Mr. Collins. You're gonna need to unmute yourself. Looks like maybe we're having a tech issue. So Jeff.
Okay, I'm here.
Oh, you're here, great, go ahead.
Madam Chair, I'm wondering if you could ask the previous speaker for some examples of benefits of criminal justice reform that have already been realized in President Trump's 3.5 years so far.
All right, go ahead.
A few good examples of the criminal justice reform would be if you watch the president, you will see a lot of people who were free from prison. They have nonviolent crimes, non-sexual assault crimes. They actually go to the White House and they tell their stories on how they use the President's Act in order to get themselves out of prison. That could be a great thing to look up. Criminal justice reform is a great tool, especially for people who are targeted in inner cities. Maybe you have a crime that you've been sentenced for, and the sentence is, far greater than the crime committed. And in those aspects, those could, possibly be issues where the Criminal Justice Reform Act could be used in order to lighten the sentence to get you out of prison on a regular basis. But these are things that the president does on a regular basis, but we need to know about it here in the inner city so we can be able to utilize those tools in order to help people in our communities.
All right, great. And with that, the first speaker is thanked. Jazz hands for our brave first affirmative. Yes, excellent, very good. Thank you, Mr. Collins. All right, so I'm now looking for a speech in the negative. And panelists, you're welcome to raise your hands. And I'm gonna call on, actually, I'm gonna do 2 quick reminders first. One is that panelists, feel free to introduce yourself in the first couple seconds of your remarks. A lot of you are a bit of a somebody and we'd like to know who you are. And also, I didn't mention this earlier, but there's a time limit for questions and answers. You have up to 1 minute to ask your question and up to 1 minute to answer. So for the first negative speech of the night, I'd like to go to Dominique DePrima. Dominique, go ahead and unmute yourself. You have 4 minutes.
Surprise. Hi, I'm Dominique DePrima. I am a progressive Democrat / independent leaning, unpredictable independent thinker. I am a radio talk host, an activist, a mom, and a patriot. I am speaking up for the negative, but I do want to start by saying that I don't hate you because you're a Republican. I actually maybe even love you. I just don't agree with you. And maybe I might even agree with you on some things. I'm a big supporter of the Second Amendment, for example. However, when it comes to President Trump, I think he is very, 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 very bad for the Black community. Now, credit where credit is due. The First Step Act was a positive thing, albeit he was pushed into doing it. He did sign it. And some people, as Mr. Collins referenced, have been freed from prison. However, it's typical of our current president. There's a contradiction. He wants to sign the First Step Act and be the law and order president who encourages police to rough up suspects when they arrest them, and who calls protesters, you know, using their constitutional rights, terrorists. He wants to say that he's a populist. Well, he does say that, but yet his biggest economic accomplishment is a huge, ginormous tax cut for the very wealthy. At the same time, talking about cutting what they call entitlements, what I call our earned benefits of Social Security, Medicare, and other safety net programs. This is a president who at the convention, you know, reveled in the fact that he's got all these women around it, albeit most of them are related to him. But anyway, at the same time, he, you know, has multiple sexual assault cases pending against him. Is a president who makes a lot of promises, but seems to follow through mainly for his wealthy cronies, friends, and family, as opposed to his loyal followers who come from the working class, the middle class, and, you know, the vast majority of Americans that did vote for President Trump. I feel that in almost every area we could find a lot of contradictions. You know, a man who has used the White House as a means of creating vast wealth and opportunity for himself and his relatives, but at the same time, you know, doesn't provide the same kinds of opportunities for everyday Americans, particularly people of color. I think the opportunity zones are an excellent example where you can sort of carpetbag and pretend that you're creating, you know, openings for African-American Latino businesses, but really what you're creating is opportunity for colonizers to come into our community, get great tax breaks, to do just what they were trying to do in South LA, where I live, where, you know, cronies of President Trump tried to buy a huge mall in our community using those benefits, those tax benefits, but had planned to turn the whole thing into office space, kick out all the local small businesses, and participate in the gentrification of our community by building massive luxury apartments. The same way that he does an eviction moratorium with no help for small mom and pop landlords and no help for the renters either. So all it is a delay until after the election, and then everybody gets kicked out on their backsides come 2021, when we could see an eviction tsunami. I do not think this president has been good for Black people. And I don't think that's Black people's fault. I hope that all of you that love and follow him will continue to push him. You can be the George Washington Carver to my W.E.B. Du Bois. But certainly so far, this man has not been good for Black people.
All right, very good. I'd like to invite questions. I'm going to start with a question from a panelist. I see Ms. Coach. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, panelists, and also all the admin people. I would like if you could ask the speaker to specify where President Trump has praised, where he has encouraged bullish behavior in cops, and also where he has like a distinction between protesters versus rioters, because the only aggressive verbiage I have heard or seen is toward rioters and not toward protesters. And those are two very different groups that are out there right now. Thanks.
All right.
Okay, I forget, Madam Chair, how much time do I have to answer the question?
1 minute. Yep.
So I would say that the president very explicitly said near the beginning of his reign that when you arrest people, you know, don't gently put their heads down, shove them in the cars, stop babying them. He has also indicated that he is a nationalist and has voiced his support for Blue Lives Matter while disrespecting the families of those who have had people murdered at the hands of police. I also think that the president, you know, yes, there are people that come in and riot and are lawless and need to be put in check and have been put in check by Black Lives Matter and other protesters. But at the same time, as Dr. King said, rioting is the language of the voiceless. And so I think there can be a good Negro, bad Negro paradigm there that says only if you follow our rules of protest are we going to give you your rights. And that's just not the way it should be. When the president crossed the street to go to a church and pray while having federal agents disperse protesters with force, that is problematic.
All righty, and we will now go to a question, our first attendee question from Kathy Cook. Kathy, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question to me.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to ask the panelist if she thinks that BLM represents mainstream Black families, and if so, if she could give me some positive examples. And does she recognize the difference between peaceful protest and rioting?
All right, go ahead.
Thank you for the question. So I know that there are people that are nonviolent, like Dr. King, and people that choose other means, like Malcolm X. I do not, condone, violence. Taking a gun somewhere, like Mr. Rittenhouse did, and mowing down people is not okay ever, whether you're left or right. However, I don't think it's up to the mainstream or the politicians to define how people can protest. Black Lives Matter, I know there are talking points, they hate the family, this, that, and the other. I'm actually very close with some of the founders of Black Lives Matter, and I've seen multiple examples. I've seen examples of them supporting each other as families, taking care of children, and that the family value is very different, is very strong there. Just because they're accepting and embracing of the LGBTQ+ community, and because they are supportive of different configurations of families, does not mean they are against the family. They are very strong on family values.
Alrighty, and for our second attendee question, we're going to go to Robert Wiley. Robert, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question to me.
Black and Hispanic unemployment were the lowest in history before COVID hit in March. Do you think this was unrelated?
Sorry, does she think? Unmute yourself and keep going.
Am I unmuted? I thought I was. Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Follow the procedure. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Mm-hmm.
Black and Hispanic unemployment were the lowest in American history before COVID hit. Do you think this was unrelated to the
Does
Trump?
she think? Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair.
There you go. Yep.
Does she think this was unrelated to the Trump presidency? Thank you.
Well done. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
I might not need a minute for that. Yes. Next question. No, I'm just kidding. African American and Latinx unemployment have been on a rebound or an uptick, if you want, a downtick, whatever, improving for the past 10 years, accelerated very quickly under the administration of President Barack Obama. And that is what I attribute it to. It is a trajectory. Now, our economy was doing, okay, but still, what are we measuring against? African-American unemployment continues to be multiple times, more than double, depending on which age bracket you're looking at. If you're looking at younger African-Americans, it can be up to 10 times higher than white Americans. So I think it's pretty disingenuous for our president to try to pat himself on the back for fixing a problem that's not fixed and which has been in the process of improving for over a decade.
All righty. And with that, our brave first native speaker is thanked. Jazz hands, everyone. Yes. Thank you so much. And I think this is going really well. I just want to remind everybody that we welcome passion. It's great. So go ahead and let it fly. Share what you really believe. And so for the next speech, I'd like to call on an affirmative speaker. So go ahead and raise your hand. And let's see. I think we're going to go with Will Riley. All right, Will, you have 4 minutes.
All right, so I am Wilfred Riley. I'm an associate professor of political science at Kentucky State University, one of the great HBCUs in the country. I also wrote the book Taboo, 10 Facts You Can't Talk About. And as I get started, I'll say that at the beginning of the last one of these debates, Rod Graham, who I've always enjoyed talking to, said something like, this is a complex issue. I'm not going to put on my hardcore debater hat for this one. And that's kind of how I feel here. I'm a registered independent, and Trump's obviously done some pretty off-the-wall things. I obviously don't back everything he's said or done. But at the same time, while presented by a media that hates him as a nightmarish racist, Trump's actually had a complex relationship with the Black community that involved doing a fair bit of good. And while I discuss that and before, I want to get into the distinction between image and media on one hand and substantive reality on the other. So a great deal of hostility to Trump among POC, and this has been repeatedly documented, is bluntly due to his mouth, to things he said on, for example, Twitter. This isn't my focus for the speech, but I would argue that a great deal even of that is due to spin from a media that does strongly dislike Trump. It's no secret that the United States press leans left. Investors Business Daily noted back in 2018 that 92% of all press coverage of Trump has been negative. That's currently up to 94%. And this has included some pretty egregious examples. In 2019, for example, the Washington Post ran a major article arguing that counties that hosted a 2016 Trump rally saw a 226% increase in hate crimes. And that sounds god-awful. But as Reason magazine pointed out, that wasn't a 200% jump overall. That was a 200% increase relative to the increase in counties that didn't have a Trump rally. So to put that in context, 2 is 200% bigger than 1. The counties that hosted a rally were also bigger overall, so they always had more crime. And as I recall, the effect of hosting a Clinton rally, this would have been the era of fighting between mainstream Dems and quote unquote Bernie bros, was just as big. We see this same sort of thing, frankly, with a lot of the quote unquote worst things that Trump is supposed to have said. For example, he was accused by the New York Times of calling a group of Hispanics, quote, animals. It turned out to be the MS-13 street gang. He was accused of using a racist description of Native people when he was talking to the legendary Navajo Wind Talkers. That turned out to be him mocking Elizabeth Warren, who is a white woman who apparently pretended to be an Indian for quite a few years. His very fine people, quote unquote, comment was obviously stupid, but I will note that it was prefaced by, and I don't mean any of the neo-Nazis, and so on. I have about 15 examples of this if anyone cares during the question period. But it is fun to contrast this with how candidates that the media likes are treated. So I'm fond of Uncle Joe myself, but Joe Biden called a top Black reporter a junkie. He told arguably the nation's biggest Black radio host that Black conservatives ain't Black. I was surprised to find. He said that poor kids can be just as smart as white kids. Sure, I worked with segregationists to get things done, and so on down the line. Some of those are exactly on par with almost any comment from Trump, but we obviously do not see the same hysteria, the same panic. People say crap, and the heuristics that we have in our minds affect how we react to it, and even the psychologists tell me how we hear it. But that's not really my primary point today. I mean, clearly or quite arguably, Trump has crossed the line on occasions verbally. My main point as a political scientist is that Trump's empirical impact on the Black community has been, as compared to most recent presidents, pretty good.
All right.
An example that's obviously relevant to me is that Trump gave more money to HBCUs than any previous president, including Mr. Obama. With the strengthening HBCUs executive order, he literally increased the Department of Education's funding by something like $400 million and gave all of that money to Black colleges. Trump did decide.
Ask you to wrap up. You can finish your sentence or whatever. Go ahead and unmute yourself. And
yeah, I mean, just going on down the line. Sorry for rambling on there, but Trump signed criminal justice reform, Black unemployment at its lowest level. Hard to say hard negative impact in reality.
all right, great. Are there questions for the speaker? First question is up for a panelist. Derek Steele, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question to me.
Madam Chair, how are you doing today?
Great, how about you?
To ask Speaker Riley, when he talks about the unemployment rate for Black Americans, what are we talking? Prevailing wage jobs, where there's livable wage jobs at least, or like what type of jobs are we talking about? Just to tout this this idea that unemployment is low.
I think that's a very fair question, but again, I think that's a very fair question for any political leader. So when we talk about the unemployment rate, as a political scientist, I have plenty of problems with the unemployment rate. For example, if you stop looking for a job, you're not generally counted as unemployed, right? But those problems are the same across all presidential level leaders. So when we say that under Trump, and he actually improved Mr. Obama's trajectory in his first 2 years, if we say under Trump, unemployment got down to 4%, black unemployment got down to 6%, that still means what it does. I mean, that was an impressive metric under Obama. That's an impressive metric under Trump. Now, to actually look at some of this stuff and to isolate the impact of racism, you have to adjust for everything that members of different races kind of differ in other than race. So what's the level of education? How many brothers as opposed to Caucasian guys decide to go into the military, not immediately enter the workforce? How many black people live in the South where wages are a third lower? So that's a very valid question, but I think at that starting metric, if we think unemployment is bad, then Trump did a reasonably good job with unemployment. So did Obama, by the way.
Excellent. So we're going to go to our first attendee question from Matthew C. Matthew, please unmute yourself and ask me your question.
Hi. Madam Chair, does the speaker believe that a president's words, especially those that are quote unquote off the wall, have power? Do those words that tacitly approve of his supporters taking violent action against those that disagree with him mean something?
All right.
I mean, obviously you want the president to behave in a contained and gentlemanly fashion, but simply put, I don't think that someone at a rally saying, get him out of here, or the things that Trump actually has said when you remove a bit of the spin are over the top horrible. Again, I actually don't like whataboutism, so I'm going to openly admit I'm engaging in it a bit here. But you could say the same thing. I mean, does Mr. Biden asking one of the country's top black journalists if he's a junkie imply a deep-seated disregard for African-American individuals? I think sometimes people say stupid stuff. I don't think politicians should be on Twitter at all, by the way, except in the case of an account moderated by a staffer or something like that. That's annoyed me since Barack Obama was on there saying black and yellow, black and yellow, black and yellow years ago. And Trump is one of the worst with it. There's no doubt about that. But no, I think trying to take some of these things like rioting in mostly left-leaning blue cities, if we're being honest, and attribute them to Twitter quotes from a year ago, there's what I'd call a weak correlational link there. But yes, it is bad. I mean, you shouldn't say that stuff on Twitter.
All right. I love the idea of politicians not being on Twitter. If that could be like public policy, that would just be great. I love when we identify common ground. I think we have some there. All right. So the next attendee question is going to come from Tony King. Tony, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
I'd like to know, why do we hear so many conversations around black on black crime versus white on white crime? It stands to reason that blacks will kill blacks because we live in segregated communities and whites will kill whites. But we constantly hear the default of, what about all this black on black crime? We should be concerned about crime, period.
All right, so your question is, what about that? Yep. Mm-hmm.
I agree with that. Actually, I think that interracial crime, I write from kind of the center right, but one of my primary targets is the alt-right. And I think that this focus on interracial crime on both hard left and hard right is absurd. I mean, black-white violent crime is about 5% of crime. The person most likely to kill you is your ex-wife. But I will say, a big part of the reason that poor white crime is so ignored is that poor white poverty tends to be dispersed and rural. Without ever ignoring critical issues in black communities. If you ever look up the 10 poorest counties in this country, they're all down where I teach here in Appalachia, or they're Indian reservations. And there are no TV stations and there are no public services. So if you look at some of the highest murder rates in the country, and I assume this might be true in the Mississippi Delta for African Americans as well. I haven't happened to travel there. But if you look at some of the highest crime rate counties in the country, those are the places, but there's no one to get that on video necessarily. I also think, final sentence, the black crime rate is somewhat higher. That's another component.
I'm gonna have to tell you this, like living in the black community, the reason why.
Sorry, we're not gonna do crosstalk. It's just strict parliamentary procedure. But thank you, and with that, our speaker is thanked. All right, jazz hands for Mr. Riley. Excellent questions, excellent answers, like usual. So, and Mr. Pellins, I'm sorry to shut you down like that. I just, that's the way that our format works. So thanks for bearing with me there. Great, so the next, I'm now looking for a speech in the negative. So go ahead and raise your hand if you have one of those. And I'm going to call on, let's see, Ivano Newbill. Go ahead.
Hi, Madam Chair. Thank you so much for this time. I want to comment on the previous speaker. I agree with some of what he's saying, but I do think that we're not looking at the overall chart of things. For example, for me, I'm an independent, diehard independent, and they call me a scrambled egg ballot person. And so I do respect what he says. I do respect what everyone has commented about, but I do feel that we're not looking at actual facts and data. I love the criminal justice reform, but I do think it fell in a couple of ways, because a lot of what was actually initiated by even President Bush and President Obama was where if there was somebody charged with the same crime, no matter what color you are, you should have the same exact time served. Is disproportionate in the Black community. And I do feel like in 2018, when they did pass the law, I do think they could have taken a bigger step to say, hey, listen, if you're in prison for the same crime someone else has and that person is out of prison, you should be out of prison as well. And that has not been the case. I do think that Black unemployment's at its lowest. I do not feel like that, while he may have some, if you look at when he took over, and my information is based on the first 36 months of each presidency, you will see that President Obama left office at 5.2. Black unemployment only went to 4%, which is only a 1% jump compared to where it was. And this is pre-COVID, so none of the stats I'm talking about is that time. So if we look at all the stats pre-COVID and the 3 months that every predecessor, President Trump, President Obama, President Bush, Reagan, Clinton, you look at them all, it has not been beneficial to the Black community. And this is according to the DOL, according to CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, the Government Accountability Office, the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Those are the stats that I'm looking at. And if you're looking at it, it's been small percentages moved up under the Trump administration. But if you look at the predecessors, there's even been bigger. One of our colleagues earlier, one of the speakers earlier mentioned about opportunity zones. Opportunity zones have been around since President Obama and President Bush, but we've had Congresses that didn't want to act on them. So it's not a fact of something that's being brand new. It's just a fact of Congress and the president, whomever's in the administration, needs to be acting on them. And so I read the laws thoroughly. Yes, some of them are 300 or 400 pages. And so when you talk about this stuff, I'm reading and going by strictly what is said. And I've been called a hypocrite before from people, Democrat called a hypocrite from people. The speaker, have the utmost respect for him. I do appreciate, that don't listen to everything on Twitter. I do think that we have to start looking at it for people say, because anybody can listen to a 30-second or 1-minute ad, but are you really taking the time to get in debt with it? I'm totally against any rioting. I'm totally for peaceful protest. The reason I don't like rioting is, what if we burn down stores and the mom and pop stores and people living above them? It defeats the purpose of what a protest is supposed to be, a peaceful protest is supposed to be like. People, and that goes both ways. And I do feel that in the Black community, so many voices are overlooked and not listened to, that when they do get the chance to speak, it's like, okay. But we're not looking at the absolute laws. We're not looking at the physical laws, taking it in hand and reading it. So my vote and my thoughts is always to be, okay, this is what they said. What is the action behind it? And what law is there that backs up what they say, or what stat is there to back up what it says? And one quick thing about police. I have the utmost respect for the police. My family's a melting pot, police, military, you name it. And I love them. I still donate to the fraternity order in Georgia and here in California. I live in Los Angeles now. I will say this, I was pulled over, a Honda Accord, and I know it's profiling, and the guy pulled me over, and they were they had a bolo out for a navy blue or dark Honda Accord. So this is back 1994.
You're a little bit over time. I'll let you finish this, but do it quickly. Go ahead and unmute.
Just real quick, and they pulled me over, and he said, well, we're looking for this, that, and the other. And so it's a great exchange. get close to the end, I say, hey, listen, I'm 6'9", I'm the core. Now I gotta go to the hospital. Not only did you pull over, so, from the knees perspective, that was bothering me, but, I have the utmost respect if they're doing it in an orderly fashion. Thank you.
Alrighty, wonderful. Are there questions for the speaker? Panelists, you get first dibs. Go ahead and raise your hand if you've got one. Alrighty. Maybe he just stumped you all. Maybe you think he's right. All right, Derek, go ahead, Mr. Steele. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hello, Madam Speaker. Once again, I just wanted to ask Speaker Newbell. I'd like to get an opportunity to hear him express the feeling that it takes as a Black man, being pulled over by the police in that type of manner, knowing that it did feel like racial profiling. I'd love to hear what was the sense of feeling that you had, that he had during that time.
All right, go ahead. Mr. Newbill, you can answer that question. I don't know if you're frozen. All right, let's wait 1 minute, see if that fixes itself. Okay, I think Ivana tried turning off his camera. Let's see if that. Okay, you're reconnecting to audio. That's good. Okay, you're muted, but it looks like you're moving, so that's good.
You talking to me?
Nope, not you, Joe. Ivana Newbill. Ivana, you're still muted. Try one more time. I know, it's the Zooms. They are the worst. Maybe try hitting the space bar. If you hold the space bar down, it should unmute you temporarily. Still having trouble. All right. So I think what we'll do is, given that we're having technical problems, we may have to move on, but last chance, Ivana, try to unmute yourself and we'll see if it works. All right, sorry, sir. Technology, 1 for technology, 0 for us. So we're gonna have to go ahead and move on to a speech in the affirmative. And so for the next speech in the affirmative, go ahead and raise your hand. And I'm gonna call on Professor Mead, Larry Mead, go ahead. Unmute yourself, you have 4 minutes.
Am I unmuted?
Yep.
Yep, good, okay. I'm a professor at New York University, teach political science. My view of Trump is mixed. I think he has created serious problems by the way he talks about people. He's not a gracious or eloquent president. He's divisive in manner, but he's done several things that really do help Black Americans. One of them is he's run a very good economy, even given the COVID problem. It may not be good for the whole country, but it definitely has been good for Blacks by keeping unemployment low, job growth very high. Secondly, Trump has reduced immigration by a number of tactics, especially illegal immigration, to some extent also legal immigration. That improves the job market for Black Americans, many of whom are low income, and thereby competing with the immigrants. So I think that is a substantial contribution to them. And the third thing I'd mention is crime. Not that he personally has much directly to do with crime, but he has made it a priority in his administration and thereby countered the recent tendency to make protests, often violent protests, into a political tactic. So we need to keep crime low. Trump has done that without apology, and I think that's helpful. So those are the things I'd mention.
All right, very good. Are there questions for the speaker? Panelists, once again, you get first go at it. So raise your hand visually if you have a question for the speaker. Mr. O'Connor, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would ask the speaker how he thinks about separating policy and rhetoric, particularly when you consider that Trump sort of came to prominence politically by promoting the birther conspiracy, which many on the left would sort of paint as racist, and also has said a lot of remarks that people find to be, derogatory toward minority groups.
His style is controversial, but there is a silver lining to it. And that is, we have been prevented from talking candidly about minority groups and their struggles, in part by a sense that it somehow isn't helpful to do that. Trump has broken down some of those taboos by speaking in an unguarded manner about these groups. It's not always pleasant, but he tends to have his finger on real problems. And for that reason, I think there's something of value to it. We're not going to achieve integration of groups that are struggling unless we can deal with their problems more honestly. And I think Trump has promoted that, even though his manner is often controversial.
All right, very good. And for the first attendee question, we will go to Rachel Bailey. Rachel, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
My thanks to all the panelists, and actually my question was for Mr. Newbill, if and when we got him back.
Cool. Unfortunately, we can't do that right now, but we're actually having a tech support person call him, so we're hoping to have Mr. Newbill once again, but we're not going to do that right this minute.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so for an attendee question, we'll go to Stacy Nakel. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question to me.
Hi, Madam Chair. I'd like to ask the last speaker how he feels about the family separations in the detention camps that have happened in the past until they were stopped by social workers like myself because it's trauma, and it continuing today through various means. Thank you.
All right, go ahead.
Immigration and restraints on immigration are inherently controversial. Every individual case appears outrageous, but we absolutely have to set some overall limits. And there's no way to set limits without being willing to compromise on the individual cases. If you just worry about those outrages that you mentioned, then effectively it's an open border. And we can't allow that. We have to set some limits on the number of people entering the country. There's simply no way to avoid upset over the individual cases.
All right, and for our second attendee question, we will go to Michael Barden. Michael, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yes, Madam Chair. I'd like to ask Professor Mead how he thinks that low-paying agricultural service jobs for immigrants, illegal or legal, has actually hurt higher paying, good paying jobs for Blacks or for anyone else for that matter.
Right.
That's the one case where it may be necessary to make an exception to what I'm saying. There's no question that farm labor is something that most Americans don't want to do. And we bring in temporary workers, chiefly from Mexico, to do it. I'm not sure we have a solution to that, but in the past, that has been a tremendous loophole that has allowed a whole lot of people to come into the country, which we really don't intend. So I don't have a complete solution, but I don't think it casts doubt about the overall need to restrain immigration.
All right. Very good. And with that, our affirmative speakers thanked. Jazz hands for Professor Mead. Thank you so much. Good, good. I'm now looking for a speech in the negative. Go ahead and raise your hand if you have one. And we're going to go with Roderick Graham. Roderick, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Wait, my question?
Excuse me. Give your speech. Yep.
Okay. All right.
You have 4 minutes.
So, well, I guess I should introduce myself. So, my name is Rod Graham. I'm an associate professor at Old Dominion University. It's down in Norfolk, Virginia. And I don't really study this that much, but I do a lot of Twittering or tweeting, and that's how I met John, and that's how it started. So, yeah, this speech is in the negative. So is Trump good for Black America? It's a hard no for me. And I'll take a sociological view. So Trump's rise to me was powered by a white populist and an evangelical Christian push. And they felt that their country was escaping them in a way. And that's the framework that I'm working with. I think this hurts Black America in two ways. I think the first is that it's the attitudes of those voters. I think people are more emboldened because they can now express resentment towards racial minorities more openly. And this has been called the Trump effect by some scholars, both sociologists and political scientists. Maybe Dr. Riley knows about this. And so there's been a spike in hate crimes through at least 2019. And this is attributed to the fact that now there's a person in office who legitimizes some of these views. Just in a personal experience, all these things I'm seeing online, for lack of a better word, and I hope the audience doesn't get mad at me, white folks behaving badly, I'm gonna call it. The Karens and Beckys in stores, the continuing police aggression, and maybe even people who are who refuse to wear masks. This is all like this sense that, oh, we have our country back, or we're getting it back. And I think this hurts Black folks in ways that is not easy to measure, but no less significant. I mean, there's a sense that there's a group of people or a country that's antagonistic towards them. So that's the first way, the attitudes of Trump voters. And I think the second way has to do with policies. I think that Trump is courting those populist and evangelical voters. And so there's a certain logic that goes with that. One is the effort to repeal the Affordable Care Act. Now, this is a Republican staple of repealing this, so it's not just about Trump, but this hurts Black Americans. In fact, to me, that's a first order problem. In any politician who says they want to take away your health care, that's a non-starter, because without health, you don't have anything else. And so this hurts Black folk. Second, the Trump tax cuts, which I think the second speaker spoke about, this doesn't help working class people at all. It's really for the wealthy. And I get the logic behind it. The idea is that, well, it's going to trickle down to them investing and it'll lead to more jobs. I don't know if that's actually accurate. Maybe someone will dispute that, but I don't think that actually occurs. I know what occurs is that there's less of a tax base in a locality. So it means that there's less money for schools. And in the case of my small hometown in Lake City, South Carolina, called Lake City, we have no police department. So, I mean, it just kind of hurts working class people. And then finally, he's the law and order president. And what that means is, while he might exhibit some lip service towards police reform, it will antagonize his base. So he's not going to do anything that's really, really getting at the roots of the problem. And this hurts Black folk, because even if Black folk are committing more crimes, they're also more likely to be aggressed, treated unfairly, and be subjected to violence, both lethal and non-lethal. There's some concern that there's some dispute about whether lethal violence is visited upon white folks or Black folks more, but certainly with non-lethal violence, the tasing and the handcuffs and throwing to the ground, there's no argument that this occurs more against Black folk. So these things hurt Black Americans.
Alrighty.
Okay, I'm out of time. Okay.
Yeah, you're out of time. Thank you. Alrighty, are there questions for the speaker? I'm gonna start with Mr. Riley, do you have a question? I can't tell.
Yeah, I was just raising my hand physically. I didn't think I messed up.
You were. It was just moving out of the screen, so I wasn't sure. Yes, go for it. Ask your question to me.
Yes. So, Madam Chair, Dr. Grant, the most recent speaker, discussed the alleged impact of Donald Trump on crimes against minorities, and this is something I'm actually writing about right now. it looks like white crime against Black people came pretty close to an all-time low in the most recent Bureau of Justice Statistics report. There are about 59,000 white on Black crimes. And in comparison, there were almost 500,000 Black on white crimes, which is actually more of a Black on white balance in terms of interracial crime that you normally see. Looking at hate crimes, we did see a couple of years ago a jump from about 6,000 to 7,000 hate crimes on an annual basis. But a big part of that is because more than 1,000 new police departments started reporting. The last 2 years, they've been stable at 7,175 2 years ago, then 7,120. So my question for the previous speaker would simply be how he would respond to that, Madam Chair. I mean, is there evidence of a surge in interracial violence? Because I find interracial crime to be a tiny percentage of crime, and I don't think it's necessarily fair to say whites commit most of that against Black people.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Graham.
That's a good response. So I'm not privy to the data you have from the FBI. I'm quoting a study.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry?
Data that he has. Sorry, you got to do the third person thing too. You're not privy to the data that he's got.
Data that the respondent has that he has. So I cannot speak to that directly. The study I'm quoting was published in 2019, and is specifically for hate crimes, which is what I think Black Americans, at least subjectively, find more important. You're totally right about the interracial violence, Black towards white, is higher than white towards Black. But when we're talking about the impact, which again is hard to measure, so this is kind of me extrapolating, hate crimes matter more than a mugging when we're talking about things such as racial disparity and racism.
Alrighty, and now for attendee questions. The first one we will take from Heidi Campbell. Heidi, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Madam Chair, thank you for doing such an excellent job this evening of moderating this conversation. Does Mr. Graham believe that this is just going to be news cycled out, or that we will actually have an opportunity to finally address the systemic racism that pervades every aspect of our society?
Thank you for that question, and also thank you for the very accurate comment that that Madam Speaker is really holding it down. I am hopeful that given what we've been seeing, I think that there's a push, both left and right, to deal with at least police reform. Some of the other things, like maybe as an academic, we do a lot of symbolic things. So I'm not sure what's going to happen in terms of academia and hiring and these types of things. But certainly with police reform, I do believe that there will be a change, especially if we have another person in office.
Alrighty, very good. And for our second attendee question, we'll go to Tamara Applebaum. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right.
You are. Thank
Good.
You are the only one on this side of the Mississippi who did. Good on you, and I second everybody. You're doing an amazing job moderating. I wanted you to ask Roderick why he feels that hate crimes matter more than other crimes. I don't see why the murder of 8-year-old Sequoia Turner at the Wendy's does not matter. I feel that her death, for ideological reasons perpetrated by BLM activists, rioters, is inhumane and awful. And I think that kind of violence is really affecting the United States. So why this judgment that white on Black crime matters more? I feel that the Black community in general is plagued by Black on Black crime, and it's keeping people down. It's keeping the Black community back. And I don't see why there isn't an acknowledgement of that amongst Black leaders or leaders in general.
All right, go ahead.
Well, the second part about the acknowledgement of leaders, I'm not sure, but that first question is an important one, and it speaks to the distinction between qualitative data and quantitative data. So it's one thing to show a spreadsheet where you have, okay, you know, here's how many murders there have been, and so you can deduce some kind of conclusion based upon those hard numbers. But when scholars do qualitative work where they talk to Black folks, you'll find that they really care about interracial violence, white folks against them, because it speaks to something historical. And a lot of people dismiss that data, but I don't, because it impacts how people vote and how people think. I mean, I even started my discussion by talking about how Trump courts white evangelicals and white populists. Well, it might be objectively that Trump's policies don't help white populists, white working class people, but they feel that way. So you have to kind of acknowledge that qualitative aspect of these things.
Dear Madam Chair, can I ask about that, or am I done?
No, sorry, you're done. Forgive me, y'all. It's just our format. Alrighty. With that, our speaker is thanked. Jazz hands for Mr. Graham. Alrighty. So I'm now looking for a speech in the affirmative. And go ahead and raise your hand. I see Ashley Gilliam. Ashley, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask and give your speech. You have 3 minutes. We're shifting to 3-minute speeches.
The rest of this very quickly. Thank you very much for calling on me. Okay, first of all, you can tell I'm a Black woman, but I did grow up in the segregated South, what most of you have not, back in the 60s, where we had busing. My dad was in service where we got bused from the military base across the river to the, across the railroad tracks to the Black side of town to go to school. We were very well educated, okay? Also, we had real racism in our communities during that period of time. You couldn't go to certain restaurants, you couldn't use certain bathrooms. I mean, nothing was available to you. But what we had more than anything, we had strong families. 90% of our families were moms and dads, okay, which made a difference. So you had but Medea, big mama, auntie that took care of you, whatever. This stuff going on, you were not having people, Black people running around killing kids, killing each other. If you got shot because you got in an argument with somebody else and you got killed, that was it. Now, some people have said this already, and this is go through as far as what President Trump has done. They did pass the First Step Act, and that's helped so far about 91% of Blacks being released from prison. Permanent funding for the HBC colleges, opportunity zones, you know, the Investment Act, and some people discussed that already. Also, they're trying to do a second act where also they would hire, you know, Black or people that come out of prison or inmates. The funding for tech and vocational schools. Now, one thing here in California and other places, funding for or support for school choice. Now, the reason why that's important, because 75% of our Black boys here are not proficient in reading, English, or math. 48% are not even graduating high school. That's pathetic, okay? In Baltimore, I just heard a statistic too. Out of 13 schools they have there, kids, now one kid was proficient in math out of 13 schools, okay? Now, we used to be the inventors, we were the mathematicians, and we're the scientists here. We had a woman here, our human computer from NASA, sent a man into space and back home with a chalkboard and piece of chalk. That's where I was raised, and that's who we were. That's not happening nowadays. But again, it comes down to the breakdown of the family. We're a lot of our kids now in foster care. Now, I don't know if people know that when they get 18, they've been abused in the system, they get kicked out on the street. They came up now with housing vouchers and also training that will help them kind of come out of there. Envision centers now are being tried to be implemented. They do a one-shot resource center. And then also he's helped too with sickle cell anemia, funding to help with that disease. We did have the lowest Black unemployment rate of record, you know, since the COVID-19. And then Black business ownership, home ownership, and wages were up during that period of time. Now, there's been a dramatic decline in food stamps and welfare programs because people were working. We went to work. Now, when I grew up, you worked. My dad and his buddies, they had 2 or 3 jobs. They go on one job in the day, they left there, go to another job at night, and on the weekends, they go to a Saturday job. Boy, Negro, everything you were called that period of time, you didn't hear one word out of them because they worked hard and they were family men. They had one day off, that was on a Sunday when they went to church, that was it, okay? Now, what happened to ISIS? The VA death and wait list that we used to have? What happened to MS-13, chopping up our children? Have you guys heard any of that lately? No, because Trump has come in that administration and got rid of a lot of that. Now, I would be remiss, because this is my main thing here, you have to take a trip down memory lane, because what I hate more than anything is hypocrisy and that's going on here and always has been for a period of time. Trump has been in office going on 4 years now. He's not running these inner cities. They have been running by Democrats for decades, since the 60s, when all this started, when we started having the breakdown family unit. That happened under LBJ, and he did it on purpose. What they did is that they put us on these welfare systems. My dad and them growing up, you couldn't give them a dime, nowhere. But they put them on the system. In order for you to take this money, lady, the man had to leave the household. That's what started to break down our families during a period of time. Now, the Republicans.
You're a little over time, so I'll let you wrap up, but go ahead and hit unmute and you can finish.
You to hear. Well, that's a quick 3 minutes here. But one last thing I want to say here, as far as President Trump, he took office on January 20th, 2017. On January 2nd, before he's even in office, he sent a tweet out. I don't like his tweets too much anyway, but he said, Ron, we got to stop this killing in Chicago. He said there was like almost 800 deaths the year before, 4,300 people shot. What can I do to help you, whatever? Ron said, hell no, just like these other mayors are doing right now. We're losing 8,000 Black kids every year to killing each other. That's unheard. Nobody else doing that. That's 32,000 just since he's been in office. Nobody's mentioned that. He's the only one talking about it. So I'm like, what are we going to do at this point about that? How can we help that? And you need to hold these city officials accountable for what they're doing. Trump in here.
Alrighty, we're gonna stop there. So questions for the speaker. I see Ms. Coach. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to know if Ms. Gillum would be able to talk some more, because I'm really excited listening to her, and I have this feeling that there are some things that she didn't get to finish.
All right,
you know what?
One more minute.
I'm a facts person, and so when people talk emotion, I understand emotion. I tell them this about Donald Trump, okay? He's this kind of person. He's not a regular politician. He's like, you kill my cat, I'm gonna kill your cat, I'm gonna kill your dog, I'm gonna burn your house down with you in it. But what you know more than anything, he cares for America. And what I hate more than anything, like most people, is hypocrisies out there. We need to get to these inner cities, and there's a way to do that, to help the people there. It is a shame before God that we let these kids die like rabid dogs on the street every weekend, and nobody seems to care. But when a police officer kills a Black person, which is very rare, guys, it's like blows up all over the news. But we can have this kind of death in our communities every year or every year, and nobody says a word. I live in a city now that used to be one of the all-American cities in California. Now we're one of the most dangerous cities in California to live. In 40 years that has happened, okay? And it's not about all this other stuff. It's about the politicians that have been in office that want our vote. Every 4 years, I tell people, Democrats show up in a Black church with some hot sauce in their pocketbook and want your vote, and don't you give it to them. Why are you giving your vote? But you look your cities, a lot of them look like hellholes or worse than third world country. When are we gonna stop this? If people are not doing what you want to do and taking care of people, vote their butts out of office. They need to go.
All right, that is 1 minute. Thank you so much. Okay, we are now gonna go for attendee questions. And the first one is gonna come from Avi Black. Avi, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Can you hear me? Am I
Yes.
audible?
Yep.
I wonder if the speaker could offer her perspective on why, with all of this plethora of great achievements during Trump's tenure, only a very small single-digit percentage of African Americans support him. Are they putting considerations of his attitude above their own self-interest?
All right, go ahead.
So apparently you believe the polls.
Sorry, he believes the polls.
Apparently he believes the poll. I'm here all the time. And I think he only got 8% of the Black vote last time. Black people are waking up. And what they're waking up to as far as what this man is doing to try to help in their communities, whatever, he's the only one who's been talking about this, and he's putting his words to action. So you say that, but I think you're going to be very surprised how many Black people are going to vote for him this time, whatever, seeing once these Democrats get exposed for what they've done in our communities.
All right, for our second attendee question, we'll go to Rich. Rich, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you to the previous speaker very much. My question is, no matter who is elected for president in November, what are the expectations from the Black community for whoever is elected? In other words, what policy is going to improve Black relations, Black-white relations? Thank you.
Right.
If Joe Biden gets in, I'm just a person of numbers. If Joe Biden gets in, it's going to be more of the same what they see in these inner cities right now. Now, he's been in office 47 years. He's the one that passed the crime bill that incarcerated us, thousands of black men or whatever. And Miss Harris continues, she's here in California, continue that same thing going on. So if they get in, it's going to be more the same. They have never shown the Democrats that they cared about black people. They care about your vote. So we're trying to get politicians in that really care what's going on and make some difference on the ground. And black people see that too. So if we get them in, it's going to be the same thing across the board. There'll be no changes. And to the point, he wants to get in 11 million illegals here, okay? All our chocolate cities are gone. We used to be 70, 80% of some of these cities, all gone because they let illegal immigration in here, okay? We're being decimated by that. And Trump's the only one. He's helped us with that, trying to keep people out of here, that you never put people from other countries above your own citizens. And that's what's happening, been happening for decades. So if he gets in, I think he's really gonna do a lot more for us, but we already spelled out what's been done. But if those two get in, it's gonna be really bad for us. And let's stop with
Sorry to cut you off. That's the minute. But let's give some jazz hands to Miss Gilliam. Thank you so much.
But one thing here, let's stop with the systemic racism.
No, sorry. I gotta hold time limits real strictly, otherwise people feel like it's unfair. But thank you. I love the passion. One more round of jazz hands. Very good. Okay. All righty. I'm now looking for a speech in the negative. We're gonna go to Silas Kulkarni. Silas, go ahead and unmute yourself. You have 3 minutes.
And can people hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can.
Madam Chair, does that count against my sound check?
just go.
So there's a saying, when white folks catch a cold, black folks get pneumonia. And what that saying means is that when there's a problem that affects everybody, white folks will get it kind of, but it will affect black people much more severely. So when the economic downturn happened back under Bush presidency, the loss in wealth and income for black America was so much dramatically more than for white America. This is true almost across any metric you look at, that when there's problems that hit all of us, they hit black folks the worst, because black folks are peculiarly vulnerable in American society for a variety of reasons, many of them economic. Nowhere has that been more true than in the case of COVID-19, which I'm surprised nobody has mentioned so far. Okay, everyone so far has talked about black unemployment rates as if COVID didn't happen, but COVID did happen, okay? So let me just talk about how COVID-19 has affected black Americans, because I think that whatever you feel about President Trump, we need to look at facts. And people claim he has a big mouth, but he gets things done. But on the most important issue affecting the most Americans and their actual most important thing, which is whether they live or die, he's been an utter failure. And America is one of the lowest performing in COVID in the entire world. We have one of the highest number of deaths of almost any, or actually literally of any country. And not just by, not just total, but even by population, it's terrible. So let me talk specifically about this. Almost 40,000 black Americans have died from COVID. 40,000, okay? Black Americans are getting hit way worse than other Americans. The death rate is over 2 times higher. The hospitalization rate is 4.7 times higher, okay? Nearly 1 in 1,000 black Americans has died of COVID already, 1 in 1,000. And that translates to 1 in 3 black Americans know someone who's died from COVID. I've been very honored to have a lot of black conservatives on this call, and I really respect the representation of the diversity of the black community here that gets past some of the racist assumptions about political biases. And you could even just look at one of the most prominent black conservatives in America, Herman Cain, who ran for president, died of COVID. This is affecting all of us, and it's affecting black Americans worst of all. Talk about the economic downturn as a result of COVID, okay? We were talking about a historically low black unemployment rate. I don't know what we're talking about here. The black unemployment rate is about 16% right now. It's in the double digits in a way it wasn't 4 years ago. And the reason is that COVID has destroyed our economy. So if you want to talk about Donald Trump having a big mouth but being effective, talk to him about his ineffectiveness on COVID, because that is the most important issue. It's a life or death issue. And on this point, I will just briefly say, here are some of the things that Trump has done that made COVID, Trump didn't cause COVID, but he handled it very poorly. So one, he disbanded a global health and security biodefense unit, a task force designed to deal with pandemics, as one of his first acts in office.
You're a little over time, but I'll let you wrap up. Go ahead. You have to unmute yourself, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Two, he has discouraged mask wearing, including not wearing it even in his own RNC speech. A study from the University of Washington says that 1 in 4 deaths from COVID could have been prevented by broader mask usage. That's 10,000 Black Americans who would be alive today, and the economy that would be much better. And lastly, he's just said crazy things. Like he says that drinking bleach could help, or promoting hydroxychloroquine as a untested remedy. It's been a terrible COVID response, and that has hurt Black Americans more than anybody, both economically and in their actual lives. And that's, I think, the most important thing, that good unemployment rate has gone with the wind because of its ineffectiveness when it comes to COVID. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Alrighty. Are there questions for the speaker? Panelists? First, Keith Hardeen, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question to me.
Okay, good evening, Madam Chair. Good to see you again. It's always good to see you.
You too, sir.
Yeah, well, you know, I'm getting pretty much a vet of this. I wanted to ask the speaker, you know, he made a statement that's kind of interesting, or, you know, he said that if blacks are hit worse, this is not what he said, but I'm going to ask the question, if blacks are hit worse by every negative, and he didn't say every negative, but I assume I'm going to say every negative because that's what's pretty much usually reported. Every negative in the society, blacks seem to take the lead as to being the worst victims of every single, whether it's COVID or anything else, poverty, you name it, healthcare, as some people have said. So I'm just wondering if we could use that same principle, because I'm a man that really like to follow principle and ideas. That's what I believe should run the country, not statistics. But is it also true, or could it be true, same be held true, that where whites aren't deprived of their privileges and immunities, as the 14th Amendment says in the 5th Amendment, that we should not be deprived of life, liberty, and property? Wouldn't that, if we actually followed that principle of our Constitution, wouldn't that also apply to blacks in society?
All right, go ahead.
I hope I'm understanding the question correctly, but I certainly believe that the deprivation of life, liberty, or property disproportionately is one of the greatest wrongs that we could do by race. You know, I didn't introduce myself, I apologize for that, but I'm an educator. I was an 8th grade math teacher, and usually in overwhelmingly poor and African-American parts of New York and DC. And I fought my whole life to try and create equality of opportunity about race. That's really important to me. And so the equal protection of the law and the equal opportunities of society is just crucially important to me. So I really respect Mr. Hardeen, and I appreciate that.
All right, very good. Let's go to attendee questions. We're going to start with Marley Silverman. Marley, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask me your question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, you're doing a wonderful job. I'm grateful for this opportunity. I would like to ask the current speaker, Silas, to elaborate a little more on the job losses of Black Americans, because I believe this is an important topic of conversation. The ability for Americans, for Black Americans, to survive and to thrive, I think, have been predominantly disregarded for a long, long time in this country when we talk about equality versus inequality. Thank you so much.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, so the Black unemployment rate has dropped, has increased, I should say, from 6.1% to 16.1%. It's more than doubled, almost tripled. And if you think about that in terms of millions, there's in the ballpark of 40 million, a little bit more than 40 million African Americans. And only about half of those in the workforce, about 20 million. So if you're talking about you're talking about 2.5 million people out of work. That's staggering. That's going to lead to all kinds of crises down the road. And that was not completely, but largely preventable with a better response to COVID from a president who was more effective.
All righty, and for the second questioner, we're going to go to Ron McFarland. Ron, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question to me.
Yes, Madam Chair, could you ask the speaker if he could give me 3 items that Trump has done well for COVID and 3 that he's done bad?
All right.
It'll be hard for me to do an equal number there because I don't believe that it's an equal number there, but one that I can cite that's a clear example of something done relatively well, I think that early banning of travel from China was a good example. I wish that had been stricter. I wish that they had shut down travel exclusively. There was a lot of exceptions that led to a lot more people coming in with the disease, which led to a lot more spread. So that's one good example. Let's see. I think having Dr. Fauci talk a lot was something good. Dr. Fauci's, for anybody who knows epidemiology, is an incredibly respected epidemiologist. So I think having Dr. Fauci talk a lot was helpful. In terms of things that were not effective, I think one of the biggest things was downplaying the risk early. He kept saying it's going to be over by the next holiday, but it's going to be over next week. It's going to be, and like, instead of saying we need to lock down now, get our testing regime in order, and everybody needs to be wearing a mask, he sent the opposite message, and that resulted in a lot more widespread. Like if it had started with a lockdown sooner and had been more universal, as opposed to, like, I'm from Texas. Texas was like, lockdowns are for liberals. It's like, well, now a lot of people in my hometown of Houston are dying. Yeah, so that's a real problem. Is that, and then the last thing was discouraging mask wearing. Mask wearing, like I said, 1/4 of the deaths could have been prevented by more widespread mask wearing.
Okay, very good. And with that, our speaker is thanked. Jazz hands for Mr. Kulkarni. All right, everybody, we're going to take a brief moment here. So I know that contrary to a lot of our debates, a lot of folks are off screen for this. And so we want to give you all a chance to weigh in on how you think this debate is going. So we're going to do our first poll of the night. There are 1 of 2. And if our poll manager would go ahead and launch it, you will have 1 minute to answer. Alrighty. Panelists, you can participate as well. All right. So you can all see what happened here, and this is good. It's interesting. So it sounds like folks really feel like there's definitely a range of perspectives here. I totally see that. Yes, absolutely. And also, y'all are doing a really good job of showing respect to others. Very well done on that. And it sounds like we feel like the truthfulness and honesty of the opinions shared is very real and very much there. Thank you for that. And we'd like to hear a few more personal experiences. So thanks, everybody. Janet, if you get and close the poll, panelists, you'll have to hit the X yourself. But yeah, that's just a little bit of feedback for us. Very good. Okay, so I'd now like to move on to a speech in the affirmative. And I just want y'all to know that I'm gonna have to start making speeches shorter, unfortunately, because we are running a little bit behind schedule. So we're gonna shorten speeches to 2 minutes. Apologies for that. And I think we're gonna switch to taking 1 attendee question and 1 panelist question. So for a speech in the affirmative, I'd like to go to Paul Norris. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, April.
You still have to call me Madam Chair, even though you know me.
Oh, that's right. Thank you, Madam Chair, April.
Yep.
So I am a psychotherapist in training. My name is Paul Norris. I used to work in technology and data. In my training, I've really come to understand the importance of perception, and that what we perceive is in its own way real, always. One of my early experiences as a child was going to Chattanooga State Park. I think I was about 4 years old, and for the very first time seeing drinking fountains labeled black, white, and colored. And I'm sure that lots of little white kids say this story. I thought, well, gee, that colored water must be better than the white water. And my mom just thought that was so cute. And when they explained to me, you know, that, no, you see, there are these people who have to use separate drinking fountains and separate bathrooms. Even as a 4-year-old, I just knew that shit was wrong. Fast forward many years later, I'm 20. I get off a bus. I've been traveling through South America. I get off a bus in Rio de Janeiro, and there's just this feeling of something that is really different. And what I came to understand is it was lack of racial animosity based on the different history of Brazil, and that the Portuguese, although they had slaves, they married their slaves. And so Brazil is a very intermarried nation. Fast forward another 10 years, I married outside my race. And so if you ever see a Christmas picture of my family, some people look at it and their very first reaction is, what's the white guy doing there? I just want to recognize the reality of the experiences that have been shared here. But what I can say.
So unfortunately, Mr. Norris, you're about out of time. So I know that you probably want to say a little more. Just do it quickly.
Oh my God, I was just getting started. I forgot it was 2 minutes. Trump's rejection of victimhood culture and Marxism and socialism. And one of the very most important things in life is to understand that we are in control of our own lives. And if we focus on our own agency, we end up being a lot better off. Marxism, everybody loses in the end. I guess the last thing I'll say is rioting and theft are counterproductive. I'm really clear on this. I'm not saying all violence is counterproductive. There can be targeted violence, but rioting and theft has no moral value and is a losing proposition. And I totally forgot I had 2 minutes instead of 4.
It's okay. Some good things in that little bit of overtime there. Alrighty, so we're going to take 2 quick questions. The first is from a panelist. Raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question. Mr. Kulkarni.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the speaker. The gentleman spoke about the protest rioting, things of that nature. I'd ask him, had those things increased or decreased with Donald Trump as president?
I think the more important point is that you don't get what you want by breaking the rules of civilized society. You get a backlash.
For clarification?
Nope, sorry. Just because we're going fast. So for the attendee question for right now, we're going to go with Michael Stutzler. Michael, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
I've got to find my mute. Where's my mute?
We can hear you, don't worry.
Okay, good.
Just ask it to me.
Madam Chair, does the speaker feel that Trump uses his own victimhood to build his support?
Okay, go ahead.
I'm stumped. I don't get the Trump using victimhood thing. Sorry if I missed it. I don't get it.
All right. With that, Mr. Norris is thanked. Jazz hands for our San Francisco therapist. Excellent. All right. I'm now looking for a speech in the negative. Rock Wangosi, go ahead. Unmute yourself. You have 2 minutes.
Sure.
Just
thank
2
you.
little minutes.
Yeah, right. I hope the rain is not too loud. My name is Rahman Wangosi. I probably don't have as large of a platform as everyone else. I'm a data analyst. I work for large corporations. I'm a father. And the point that I want to make is, people have brought up, the First Step Act, the Future Act, all of these different things, the economy. And on none of these points, Donald Trump has led on none of them. The First Act and the Futures Act, these were bipartisan issues coming out of Congress that he just signed his name on, right? The economy largely operates outside of the president. He just, and it's not to say that he didn't do things, the economy is booming, but again, everyone talks about the stats, and what I want to focus on is the leadership. I started ROTC when I was in 8th grade. Sergeant Major James and Sergeant Major Walker, and they hammered leadership to us. And leaders were not integrous, integrity, accountability, tact, sacrifice. These are things that Donald Trump does not exhibit across any topic or on any spectrum. The last speaker talked about victimhood, and it seems to be that Trump's main point is media is mean to me. These people don't like me. This is why I say these things. This is why I troll, you know, here domestically, internationally, and it's always what's the, you know, no one is treating me right. Look at what I've done for Black America. All of these things, and the thing that really bothers me is that in this moment in 2020, when we have more technology and more ways to connect within the Black community, the focus is still not within the Black community. It's because Donald Trump, through his victimization of why don't I get any credit, we're focusing our conversation on how has Donald Trump helped us when we aren't talking about how we are helping ourselves.
Alrighty, I think that's a great line to end on, but you can unmute and finish your sentence if you want to.
No, that's fine. I've made my point. Ask the question.
All right, lovely. I'd like to first go to a panelist. So if there's a panelist who'd like to ask a question, Mr. Graham, go ahead.
So thank you, the previous speaker. I've also noticed what seems to be a lack of leadership, and I gave my own reason why he got elected. But I was wondering what the speaker thinks is the reason why, despite this poor leadership, he was elected into office.
All right.
I think one of the, and this is where it gets, it goes the opposite way for me. I think Donald Trump does speak to for a lot of people that haven't had a voice, that have been marginalized. And this is something that I fault both conservative and progressive politicians. They've given all this lip service, and what Trump has done to his genius, he has talked about the things that people haven't talked about or were PC about. I just don't think that he has used these points to do anything positive for the country. Our education is still failing. Our healthcare is still failing. Our infrastructure is still failing. So yeah, while he talks the talk and says, you know what, everyone can say Christmas again, it's all smoke and mirrors. These are sugar highs. And the systemic issues that our country is facing, we're now, in my opinion, another half decade behind of fixing these problems that have been neglected for generations.
Alrighty, and for our attendee question, we'll go to Tanya G. Tanya, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask me your question. All right, try one more time, Miss Tanya. There we go. Did you say your question is for this speaker?
My question last first after the currency. No, the previous speaker.
For the one who went before this person?
For the previous speaker.
All right. So we're only taking questions for the most recent speech. Sorry about that.
Yeah, and my question.
I can't hear the question at all.
All right. Sorry, try unmuting one more time. Mm-hmm.
There's a delay, it seems, when the questions are posed.
So unfortunately, your audio isn't working, and I do apologize, but I think we're going to have to go just move on from here. So sorry about that. With that, our speaker's thanked. A little bit of round of jazz hands. Yes, very good. All right, y'all. So I have to admit something, which is that we're a little bit behind on time, and I know that a lot of folks here have a lot to say. So what we're going to do is we're going to just go with 2-minute rapid fire speeches, no questions, and we're going to try to get as many folks in as possible before we've got to wrap up. So with that, I'm looking for a speech in the affirmative. Mr. Hardeen, go ahead. 2 minutes.
Thank you, everybody. It's always a pleasure to have an opportunity to speak about about issues like this, and I'm going to present a quick perspective that is rarely, if ever, presented in a forum like this. But the constitutional aspects of what he's doing, this is very important. I'm a constitutional rights activist and a self-defense specialist. And I just say that he is right. The president is the one. This is the law and order president. As long as he stands in the way, law and order will be, I'm talking about rioting will be challenged, not law and order will be challenged. But this is very important to understand. And it goes along with the saying right out of the Constitution, based on the Constitution, the United States shall guarantee to every state in the Union Republican government and shall protect each against invasion. We have an invasion domestically with our own citizens turning against our government. And this, they ought to be, in my view, they ought to be, revoked. Those who are destroying property, those who are rioting, those who are killing and maiming, those who are harming people unjustly. And by the way, slip in there, the 17-year-old kid who shot people, 2 men, I guess he killed with a rifle, that was in self-defense. That was totally in self-defense. And it's very interesting that people don't seem to see that. I guess that's it. It concludes my statement. Oh, one more thing real quickly. When a strong man is fully armed and guards his palace, it is safe until someone who is stronger and better armed attacks and overcomes him and strips him of all of his weapons and carries away his substance. That's in the book of Luke, chapter 11, verse 21. That was Jesus speaking. So even Jesus understood and knows the difference between self-defense, the right of self-defense, and those who are riotous and murderous. Thank you very much.
All right, with that, Mr. Harding is thanked. Jazz hands for sure. And I'm looking for a speech in the negative. Mr. Anderson, go ahead.
Okay, so I believe that's something that a lot of people are sort of missing, is that the question is Trump good for Black people, not necessarily has Trump done good things for Black people. Now, these bills and policies that Trump has passed have been for low-income citizens in high-need areas. So it just so happens that subsequently, since Black people make up a large portion of these low-income citizens, that we just so happen to benefit from a lot of that. And I'm not going to take that away from Trump. But in order to determine whether he is good for Black people, we need to pretty much dive into his motives. Now, Trump has never necessarily done anything directly for Black people in particular. He just hasn't. And now this is shown when he has the opportunity to do things for Black people. For example, all the Black Lives Matter movements. Now, yes, I also agree that you should not riot, you should not try to pillage in order to get attention for some type of political view. However, he has still made the intentional decision to ignore the people that are peacefully protesting. And he has completely denounced anybody that have tried to do that. You know, like, for example, like all the sports, they're not rioting, but he constantly downplays all the activists in sports, basketball, football, kneeling for the national anthem. It's okay to disagree with actions, but you need to be able to at least identify that there is a problem and show some form of sympathy. Now, Trump has even made some type of disrespectful analogy that Blake being paralyzed from the waist down forever is similar to a golfer choking out a putt. He has deliberately made the comparison that a Black life to him is not worth more than just a putt in a golf game, you know? So yes, he does all of these things and he boasts about what he has done for the Black community. And typically someone who does things for the sake of someone else will not brag about it. He's bragging about it in order to get the Black vote. Clearly.
Gonna have to ask you to wrap up. Go ahead and unmute yourself and tie it off.
So pretty much from all of this, we can clearly see that it is a fact that Trump values the Black vote over Black lives.
Alrighty, very good. And with that, Mr. Anderson is thanked. Quick jazz hands, yes, very well deserved. Okay, and I'm now looking for a speech in the affirmative. Go ahead and raise your hand visually if you have one. Mrs. Coach, Miss Coach, sorry.
It's Mrs. and thank you. I'm so glad I don't have to be one that takes questions because I don't really have a lot of credentials to myself. I don't identify first as a white woman. I identify as a Christian. And in that primary definition, I see these larger issues. I believe there are people who are racist. I do not believe that there is a thing now called systemic racism. I think hatred, jealousy, and fear are the foundations for any kind of bad life choice. I think they are the foundation of any abuse that is done to another person. I've asked a lot of people, how is Trump racist? I don't get an answer to that question. I have really enjoyed the civil comments tonight because I'm hearing things that I have never heard before in a respectful way. Most people just parrot the media narrative and hate Trump. I listen to a lot of conservative Black voices. They are often insulted and called Uncle Tom because they support Trump and what he's doing. But throughout the book, far from allowing himself to be exploited, Tom stands up for his beliefs and is grudgingly admired, even by his enemies. There was a comment about 40,000 lives lost to COVID. 40,000 of the lives have been lost to COVID in the past 6 months. In 50 days, 40,000 Black babies are aborted. So please know, any evangelical in any position of political power is for the Black person, for the Black baby, for the brown baby, for every life, for every special needs child, for everyone born with a deformity. Every pro-life person is for that individual life. 50 days, in 50 days, 40,000 Black babies are killed. Coleman Hughes was interviewed with John Woods Jr. once, and he said, most people who are killed by cops, regardless of skin color, are armed. There is a very small percentage of unarmed, but they get the majority of the media's attention.
Go ahead and wrap up.
Okay. Gianno Caldwell, an author of Taken for Granted books, he writes, back in home in the US at the beginning of 2020, African Americans experienced the best economy. Unemployment was the lowest in recorded history. Black wages were increasing. People who'd been out of work were hired and suddenly able to take their families on vacation for the first time in years. Shoot, and then I have a friend who couldn't speak. I have what she said. It
better be like 3 words.
We love Trump, she said. And she's got a son going to an HBCU college this year, I believe. That's the biggest thing for her.
All right. And with that, Miss Coach is thanked. Mrs. Coach. All righty. Thank you so much. I'm now looking for a speech in the negative. The very patient, Mr. Derek Steele. 2 minutes. Unmute yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Derek Steele. I'm a Black father to 2 fantastic young ladies, a Black husband. I live in Inglewood, California. And this conversation has been really difficult for me because the question is, or the affirmation is that Trump is good for Black people. And we're touting stats and we're, that Black people don't put together. We're touting these laws that we haven't really had conversations with Black people to figure out how they're being impacted by them. But having a discussion around how this gentleman is actually good for Black folks in general, which I think not bringing the voice and the stories of the people who are most impacted to the table to have this discussion is disingenuous. I appreciate the gentleman who spoke about the COVID piece because on a day-to-day basis in the work that I do in the response to COVID, dealing with Black people on a day-to-day basis who are being, who are having the 3-day notices put on the door and not knowing that they still have rights to try to protect themselves and having to move. Houston, Texas, just today, they're already evicting people Like there's a tsunami of injustice that's about to come, and economic disadvantage that is going to be exploited on a higher level, that I think will continue, that will completely change the context of this whole conversation, because the majority of the people who are going to be impacted by this are low-income people, even middle-income people, blacks, whites, across the board. But again, like the gentleman said earlier, you know, when white folks get a cold, black folks, you know, get the flu. You know what I'm saying?
Wrap it up. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
It's really what it's going to come down to. This is a thing where we're having this thing because we're coming up on an election to have this discussion to try to make it seem like it's all good, but really, lives are in the balance of this whole conversation. And it sounds cool to like, yeah, say it's all good. You know, Obama wasn't good for black people neither, right? Because none of these folks have actually done exactly what they need to do on behalf of black people who have been disadvantaged since slavery. So that's just my point.
Alrighty. And with that, Mr. Steele is thanked. I'm now looking for a speech in the affirmative. Mr. Chambers, go ahead and unmute yourself. You've got 2 minutes.
Hello, everybody can hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, so what I would want to say is I'm glad that I've been able to be a part of this debate and the previous debate. You know, I'm a friend of John Wood's, and, you know, all of the different perspectives that have been heard here, all are valid. I would just challenge us all with this, is that, you know, ultimately we are in the battle for our nation. No matter what side of the aisle that you stand on, or whether you be Republican or Democrat or independent, there's an attack on our value system here in this country, and there's war being waged on it in the political arena. And what we all should challenge ourselves with is not so much identifying with, you know, being African American or being white American or being Asian American or whatever your national identity is that we are all human beings. We are Americans. None of us are slaves here, okay? Speaking to African Americans, slavery ended a long, long, long time ago. So to talk about the things of yesteryear and then forget about the things that are actually happening today. You know, one of the people that spoke about abortion. I mean, we're up in arms about, you know, African Americans being, you know, treated poorly by police officers, but you know, there are a lot of kids who don't even get a chance because they're unborn because of abortion clinics. What about the wage disparities for people who are in working America, who don't maybe earn as much as their counterparts, things of that nature. We need to get back to just looking at one another as people, as opposed to that's a black man, that's a white person, and we need to do what's in the collective best interest of everyone. One of the previous speakers spoke about, you know, COVID. You know, I don't know if anyone here is aware, but the CDC just came out this week and said that, you know, basically only 6% of the COVID deaths, or 6% of the deaths for COVID didn't have any underlying conditions, right? 175,000 people approximately have died, and our officials have told us it's all due to COVID. Well, that's not exactly true. 94% of them had 2 or more underlying conditions. So we need.
Last sentence, go for it. Unmute yourself, sorry. Now unmuting is the worst. You're still muted. I unfortunately can't unmute you from here.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I would just leave us with this. It's important for us to remember that we're human beings and that we need to treat each other as one and look at and challenge and think. We need to think. We can't just parrot what we see on the news or what we heard somebody said. We have to think independently for ourselves and elect those who are going to do things in the collective best interest of all Americans.
All right, very good. And with that, Mr. Chambers is thanked. Round of jazz hands, yes. And I'm now looking for a speech in the negative. Mr. Sewell, go ahead, 2 minutes.
Hi, thanks for letting me share. You know, I do want to kind of pick up on something that the last gentleman shared, but also others have talked about concerning, you know, the need for harmony and unity to get through this moment as Americans. So I thought it was interesting that last time I checked, Black Americans and white Americans, all kinds of Americans are inhabiting the same space. I do think, to be fair, if we look at this from a global perspective, if we talk to all of our friends who live in different places, there is a different viewpoint of America right now, specifically because we haven't been able to come together to work out our differences. That is part of why we're all here today. That is part of what we're all looking for. And I think it's fair to say that our current president, yes, in terms of his words, we've all given him a pass, but as a business owner, as a Christian, as a lifelong American, I was not taught that. And I don't have anything personally against the president or his administration or anything. I actually am a conservative myself. Yet, you know, I do believe that not only do words matter, but the unity of words and action matter. And I look to groups like this, I'm a part of a lot of groups like this, that hope and pray and work. We work towards coming together to make things work. So like one of the gentlemen said, I'm not going outside scared of any one particular type of person. I have to wear a mask because of COVID. We haven't done a great job on that. Let's come together. Things like unemployment. Black unemployment's through the floor, more disproportionately than before. Let's work on that. Let's work on things that affect everyone, because we are going to have to do this together. If Black America is not healthy, guess what? White America is not healthy either. All of the speakers here, I respect them all, but please do not get fooled by any story, but look at the facts. Make the change that you want to see. Be the change you want to see. So thank you for letting me share.
With that, Mr. Schoolis, I think that's a wonderful note to end on. Thank you so much, all of you. So we're going to now go take just a couple minutes and reflect on what we've just experienced. But before we do that, just because I'm a stickler for parliamentary procedure, I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn and a second. So any panelists can just unmute themselves and say, I move we adjourn.
Move to adjourn, Madam Chair.
Move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second that motion.
All right, very good. So the motion having been moved and seconded, we are adjourned. But don't go anywhere, because this is in some ways the most interesting part of the debate, what we're about to experience. So I'd like to now, we're gonna do what is essentially a debrief. We'll take just 5 or 10 minutes. I know we're a little bit over time. Thank you everybody for staying here. I just thought this was important. And I wanna make sure, or rather, we're gonna enable the chat, and I'd like all attendees to feel welcome to paste into the chat your answers to one of these 2 questions, or both. What did you learn over the last 2 hours, and what did you enjoy? And panelists, I want to invite you to, while we're waiting for the folks to chat those things, for you to share. And so just go ahead and raise your hands visually. Professor Mead, I see that your hand is up. So what did you learn, and or what did you enjoy? You need to unmute yourself.
What's that?
Oh, sorry. Perhaps you didn't mean to have your hand raised. Don't worry about it.
That's all right. We've learned that the discourse of ordinary people, even on this very contentious matter, is quite a bit more civil than what we read about in the press, and especially in the New York Times. The Times has gone into business of hyping every question such that every day the world is coming to an end. And there's a great focus on conflict, and especially, and the Times is also very one-sided. It's strongly liberal. It endorses all feminist, all pro-racial positions, and so on and so on. They're trying to make.
So Professor Mead, I'm just gonna ask that you keep this to what you enjoyed about our debate.
Learned is that difference between the ordinary people and the press.
Alrighty, very good. Panelists, other things that you enjoyed or that you learned. Melina, go ahead.
Hi, thanks for having me, and for everyone who participated. What I learned tonight was that we do have a lot of work to do. We have a long way to go. If we could respond back and forth and continue, I'm sure we all would, pros and cons. But I like the fact that we are able to have a space and really be open and honest about what we truly think about 45 and what we think about his leadership and his tactics. I think we also have a ways to go when it comes to voter education, generally speaking, when it comes to policy and educating ourselves on policy as well, based on what I'm hearing and what I'm personally experiencing in my community, which is predominantly Black and brown and very diverse, even with the Asian population. And also realize that we have a ways to go when it comes to the facts and the impact of COVID-19, and not just the immediate impact, but the impact of COVID in the next year, 2 years, and 4 years to come with whomever will be sitting in office in our local, state, national, and federal political positions. So I'm just saying we all need to be compassionate, but we also need to be aware too that systemic racism does have an impact. It is real, and leadership has to be accountable as well as our personal selves to help fix America's problem.
Alrighty. I'd like to shift to the question. Oops, sorry, I'm just gonna mute you because there's an echo. I'd like to shift specifically to the question of what did you enjoy? So go ahead and raise your hand if you have something to say there. Mr. Kulkarni, go ahead.
She never picks on that guy up there.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So yeah, I really enjoyed the respectfulness, and I heard a lot of people echoing that sentiment. In particular, I think it's sometimes hard when you have a political position that doesn't match your sort of stereotype of your racial identity to be able to be listened to and not be, sort of pigeonholed. And, that even though I might disagree with somebody who might have a conservative perspective on an issue, I think it's really important for me that to recognize and to be able to engage with people regardless of their race on their across a broad political spectrum. And so that meant a lot to me to have that conversation within within the community across the political spectrum.
Excellent, thank you. Ivana, Mr. Newbill.
Hi, Chair Lady, Chairwoman. I just want to say I really did enjoy it. I think the big lesson for all of us, and correct me, I'm going to go ahead and speak for everyone. I think it's great that we ask questions and not assume or accuse people. I do think that we have to be able to go back and look at just a lot of facts. I think Professor Mead did mention something about television and what he is saying or not saying. I really do love what Paul Norris said, about him being a little 4-year-old story. I love Keith Harding, what he presented in the Constitution. So when we start getting into things, let's take an opportunity to listen to one another. Let's take an opportunity to look up the facts. Maybe get on a Zoom call with people and say, hey, listen, this is where I got my facts from. This is what has shaped my opinion, versus a lot of the assuming and accusing. And I want to send out a big thank you to my big brother, John Wood, for inviting me here and being in touch with me. I've developed a great relationship over the last 6-7 years with John. A big shout out to you, J-Dub. Love you, man.
Always a fan. All right. Next, we're going to go to Rahman Ghazi.
Yeah, one thing I really appreciated is the level of respect, not just for the people within the debate, but for the subject of the debate, Black America, because too often there was a lot of criticism, and I shouldn't say criticism, there was critique of issues within the Black community, but there was no demonization, and there was no sort of finger pointing and you people are bad and everything. I like you people jokes. It's 30 years old, but I still like it, so don't take it a funny way. But the respect towards the subject, I really appreciated that. And then also one thing before I go, highlighting that the media, both progressive and conservative media, they're not our friend. They are in it for their corporate interests to make money. I work for corporations, so it's not a demonization of corporations, but that the media does not have our best interest in mind. They are in pursuit of their mandate, which is to increase shareholder profits. And that conversations like this, we can bring it out of that, the media and what it is that they're doing and actually speak with people. And that's what I really appreciated about this debate.
All righty, absolutely. Next, we're going to go to Paul Norris. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I just enjoyed seeing us take on what I think is probably the toughest possible topic in America, as braver angels, no longer better angels, but now braver. And as far as I could see, pulling it off.
Excellent. All right. This might be the toughest topic we've debated. Yeah. Keith Hardeen.
Yes, this is very good. The more I do this, the more I am convinced that Braver Angels is probably the best in the nation, and probably in the world, because only in America can we do to this degree what we are doing in Braver Angels. I think it's so important to understand that if it were not for Braver Angels and what the great job that Madam Chair is doing, others like you, I think there wouldn't be as much civility as we think, based on the fact that the founders of our nation understood that if men were angels, there'd be no need for government. In other words, factions are sown into our nature. For those who are Christian, as I am, we understand that all have sinned and fall short. We all fall short of the glory of God. So there's going to be contention. There's going to be conflict in this nation in order to come to the truth. That's bottom line. What I like about Trump is he knows how to handle it. He can handle the pressure. And that is very important if you want a leader, is no matter what they say about the tweeting and all that, tweeting came about because we were not able to redress our government for grievances without being able to go on social media. That's one of the reasons I go on, because they will not hear me otherwise. It's one of the reasons I'm here on Braver Angels, because they will not hear me otherwise. By they, I mean the establishment, the deep state. Okay, so that's what we're up against. One quick thing, if the question comes down to what it's always been since the days of Moses, are men the property of the state or free souls under God? And that's what this nation is all about. So let's hope we can get a generation to understand that again.
Alrighty. We'll take just a few more. I love running out of good things people have to say. Just trying to be conscious of time. Mr. Sewell.
Hi, I'd definitely like to share that. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'd like to share that I enjoyed, the diversity of perspectives that are there. I definitely do think this leads right nicely into some great community discussion and, follow-ups on how can we build on this? How can we learn how to come together? Because at the end of the day, for those of us who consider ourselves Americans, we realize that our political system was created to work on the sole premise of disagreeing, but then coming together, working on something and getting something done. So I think Braver Angels really, goes back to that vision that the founders and the framers had. And I think we need to look at that, especially those of us who are of faith, who believe that this is going towards something great, but we cannot square off against each other as enemies, but we need to come together as friends.
Alrighty.
Thank you for letting me share.
Absolutely. We're going to take two more, Omega, and then John Wood Jr. will have the last word. Omega, go ahead.
Unmute. Yeah, I love these. I think this is great. It's great to have an open forum like this where people can, debate different ideas and perspectives and points of views on things that are very relevant in our world and society in a civil way. Some of social media like Facebook and Twitter can sometimes become a bit hostile where, a lot of good ideas that are trying to be communicated, unfortunately get lost in translation. But here with the Braver Angels team and the fantastic Madam Chair, April Lawson, kind of holding down the rails and not letting anyone get out of control, it allows for, open, civil American debate where people who want to talk about things that matter can actually talk about them. And I would just conclude with, something that's important to remember no matter who's in office. Typically, the individual's rights won't be impeded on so long as they agree with the state. And I think we've seen a lot of that during this COVID-19 crisis, which is why it's important to have venues like this for us to be able to speak and to be able to allow our voices to be heard, as one of the previous speakers said.
Alrighty, wonderful. And Mr. John Wood Jr., take us home.
Mm-hmm. Well, there are a lot of things that I enjoyed about this debate. One thing I enjoyed was my brother Derek Steele. I enjoyed the fact that he was willing to say that he found this conversation difficult because it made clear to him that we hadn't come far enough in a bunch of areas, right? I enjoyed the fact that in saying what you said, Chrissy, you were willing to acknowledge the fact that you were skeptical of a lot of what people were saying, but that at the same time, you appreciated the opportunity to get to hear things that you hadn't heard before. I appreciate the fact that Melina, in her comments, she talked about the fact that, yes, we need compassion, but we also need to be aware of things that maybe we're not aware of currently. I enjoy the fact that in this conversation, we are wrestling with the fact that we are uncomfortable with some things that we haven't necessarily been able to wrestle with in the way that we should because we don't know each other enough to do that. And so what I enjoy is us getting used to this kind of thing, because one way or another, my kids are going to grow up with your kids and your grandchildren, each and every one of you, right? And I believe that if we don't figure out how it is we live together today, regardless of who gets elected, tomorrow is not promised to us. It can't be, right? And so in this case, I do believe that the truth, the best thing will win out, you know? I believe that what's best in us will shine forward and that our politics will eventually go according to that course. Like Dr. King said, the arc of the moral universe is long, it bends towards justice. What that looks like to you and your politics is one thing, but our ability to be the type of people who can treat each other in a way that makes that happen, whatever it is, that's a question of us being able to wade through discomfort together and to do it from a spirit of genuine goodwill and love for each other as human beings, as Black, as white, and yes, as Americans, right? And so this is not the end of anything. This is the beginning, and I'm enjoying that.
All righty, thank you so much. A majority say that what you heard tonight affects how you think about this. That's a win, especially on a topic like this. And I think that the results for number 2 are the most powerful thing here. Almost 90% of you say that you are more able to see how the other side thinks after this. And so I just want to thank you all for being part of this. We're going to go ahead and take those results down. But I think, you know, that really says a lot. And all of you who spoke tonight should be proud, including every single questioner. This has been a powerful thing. Thank you so much. This has been meaningful for me, and I think for quite a few folks here. And so as we say at Braver Angels, let's get out there and build a house united. Good night, y'all.